The Galactic Military Academy on Station 7 was famous for many things. It was the largest military training center in the known galaxy. It had produced more fleet admirals than any other academy. It had the best equipment, the best instructors, and the best students from over 200 different species. But most of all, it was famous for never making mistakes. The administration system had been running for 400 years without a single error. Every cadet was placed in the correct class. Every schedule was perfect. Every assignment was double-checked by 3 different AI systems before it was sent out. So when Park looked at her tablet and saw her room assignment, she did not question it. The academy did not make mistakes. If her tablet said she was supposed to go to Combat Wing Delta, then that was where she was supposed to go. Was 22 years old. She stood at 157 centimeters tall, which was short even by human standards. She weighed 48 kilograms, which made her lighter than most of the equipment bags the other cadets carried. Her hair was black and cut short, just above her shoulders. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they held a strange calmness that most people found unsettling. She had come to the academy to join the medical support program. She wanted to be a field medic, helping wounded soldiers on the battlefield. It was a noble job, an important job. It was also considered the safest job for humans at the academy. Humans were not known for being warriors. In the grand ranking of species by combat ability, humans fell somewhere in the middle of the list. They were not weak, but they were not strong either. They were not slow, but they were not fast either. They did not have claws or fangs or armor or venom. They were, by galactic standards, completely average. This was why most humans at the academy chose support roles: medical, engineering, communications, logistics. These were the jobs where humans could contribute without getting killed. Predator class was not one of these jobs. Walked through the academy corridors, following the directions on her tablet. She passed the medical wing, where she was supposed to be. She passed the engineering labs and the communications center. She kept walking until she reached a part of the academy she had never seen before. Combat Wing Delta was located in the deepest section of the station. The corridors here were wider than normal, built to accommodate species that were much larger than humans. The lights were dimmer, designed for eyes that could see in the dark. The air was cooler, kept at a temperature that was comfortable for cold-blooded species. Stopped in front of a massive door. It was 3 meters tall and made of reinforced steel. A sign above it read, "Predator Class Authorized Personnel Only." She looked at her tablet one more time. The assignment was clear. This was where she was supposed to be. She pressed her hand against the scanner. The door recognized her DNA and slid open. The training hall was enormous. It was the size of a small stadium, with high ceilings and reinforced walls. Combat dummies lined one side of the room. Weapons racks lined the other. In the center, standing in perfect formation, were 14 alien cadets. They were the most dangerous beings had ever seen. The smallest one was It stood 2.4 meters tall and had 4 arms, each one ending in claws that could cut through metal. Its skin was gray and leathery, covered in natural armor plates. Its eyes were small and red, designed for hunting in dark caves. Next to the stood 2. They were creatures, with 6 legs and 2 arms. Their bodies were covered in a hard shell that could stop most energy weapons. Their mouths were filled with fangs that dripped with venom strong enough to kill a human in seconds. But the largest of them all were There were 5 in the class. They were massive creatures, standing between 2.5 and 3 meters tall. Their bodies were covered in thick scales that served as natural armor. Their jaws were powerful enough to crush starship hull plating. Their claws could tear through steel like paper. They were apex predators. Their species had spent 10,000 years hunting other intelligent beings before they achieved. Even now, centuries after joining galactic civilization, They were still considered the most dangerous species in known space. All 14 of these predators turned to look at. She stood in the doorway, her medical tablet clutched in her hands, her academy uniform clean and pressed. She was smaller than any of them. She was weaker than any of them. She was, by every measure that mattered in this room, prey. But she did not run. Senior Instructor was standing at the front of the class. He was human, one of the few human instructors assigned to Predator class. He was tall for a human, with broad shoulders and a face that had seen many battles. He had been in the middle of giving orders for hand-to-hand combat drills when the door opened. Now he stood frozen, his mouth still open, his command dead in his throat. He could not believe what he was seeing. A human woman, barely more than a girl, standing in the doorway of Predator class. It was impossible. It was a mistake. It had to be a mistake. "Cadet," he said, his voice cracking, "you are in the wrong." "Park, reporting as assigned, sir." Her voice was calm, too calm. She held up her tablet so he could see the screen. The holographic display showed her assignment in clear, official text. Combat Wing Delta, Predator Class, Seat 15. Walked forward and took the tablet from her hands. He read the assignment once. He read it twice. He read it 3 times, looking for some error, some glitch, some explanation for what he was seeing. There was none. The assignment was legitimate. It was signed by the Academy Director. It was stamped by Central Processing. It was authorized by the Military Oversight Committee. According to every official record, Park was exactly where she was supposed to be. Behind him, one of them let out a low, rumbling sound. It was a laugh, but it sounded more like thunder rolling across a mountain. "The humans send us a snack," they said. His name was, and he was the largest of his kind in the class. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, and his scales were the dark red color of dried blood. How thoughtful of them! Several of the other predators laughed. The sound filled the training hall, echoing off the walls and ceiling. Looked at, she met his eyes without flinching. She did not step back. She did not look away. She simply stood there, small and fragile and completely unafraid. Stopped laughing. There was something in her eyes that he did not understand, something that did not belong in the eyes of prey. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was something else entirely. It was patience. Instructor handed the tablet back too. His hand was shaking slightly, though he tried to hide it. "Take your seat, Cadet Park," he said. "Seat 15, back row." Bowed her head respectfully. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." She walked past the 14 predators without hesitation. She found her seat in the back row and sat down. She placed her tablet on the desk in front of her and folded her hands in her lap. And she waited. The predators watched her, the instructor watched her. Nobody spoke, nobody moved. The training hall had never been so quiet. That night, after all the cadets had returned to their rooms, Instructor sat alone in his office. The lights were dim. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. He did not notice. His eyes were fixed on the holographic screen floating in front of him. He was reading Park's file. Every cadet at the academy had a file. It contained their basic information, their medical records, their test scores, and their psychological evaluations. Most files were boring. Most files were normal. Most files could be read in 5 minutes and forgotten. His file was different. It was over 300 pages long. Had started reading it right after class ended. That was 6 hours ago. He was only halfway through, and already he understood why Central Processing had not flagged her assignment as an error. The first section of the file contained her basic information. Name, Park, age, 22 standard years, height, 157 centimeters, weight, 48 kilograms, birthplace, human colony 442b. Knew about 442b. Everyone knew about 442b. It had been one of the largest human colonies outside the Sol system, home to over 2 million people. 6 years ago, it had been destroyed. A passing asteroid had knocked a moon out of orbit. The moon had crashed into the planet. The impact had killed 1.8 million people in the first hour. The survivors had spent the next 3 days fighting to stay alive while rescue ships raced to reach them. Park had been 16 years old when the moon fell. The second section of her file contained her medical records from the disaster. Read through them slowly, his face growing paler with each page. Crushed pelvis. Her entire lower body had been trapped under a collapsed building for 7 hours before rescue teams could reach her. Severed spine. The same collapse had broken her back in 3 places. The doctors had not expected her to ever walk again. Degree burns over 40% of her body. When the rescue team finally freed her, she had been caught in a fire that swept through the ruins. The flames had burned away most of the skin on her arms, legs, and back. Exposure to vacuum for 47 seconds. During the evacuation, her rescue shuttle had been hit by debris. The hull had been breached. She had been sucked into space before emergency systems could seal the gap. Complete cardiac arrest for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Her heart had stopped. She had been clinically dead for over 4 minutes. The rescue team had used emergency medical nanobots to restart her heart, but they had not expected her to survive. She had survived. Not just survived, she had recovered. The medical records showed her rehabilitation process. It had taken 8 months. 8 months of surgeries, treatments, and therapy. 8 months of learning to walk again, learning to move again, learning to live again. But here was the part that made sit back in his chair and stare at the ceiling. During those 8 months had not just recovered, she had trained. Her physical therapy sessions had become combat training. Her doctors had prescribed simple exercises to rebuild her muscles. She had turned those exercises into martial arts practice. Her pain management program had become pain resistance training. She had learned to ignore pain, to push through it, to treat it as nothing more than information. By the time she was discharged from the hospital, she had earned 3 separate certifications in human combat disciplines. Taekwondo, a striking art focused on powerful kicks. Hapkido, a grappling art focused on joint locks and throws. And something the file simply called survival combat, a military fighting system designed for situations where there were no rules. The Galactic Medical Board had studied her case for 2 years. They had written over 50 papers about her. They had given her a special designation, a term used in galactic medical circles for humans who had survived events that should have killed them. They called her a miracle girl. Understood the name. What had survived should have killed her 10 times over. Any other species in the galaxy would have died from any one of those injuries. But humans were different. Humans had something that the rest of the galaxy was only beginning to understand. They called it persistence. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest. They were not the most armored or the most venomous. But they were, without question, the hardest to kill. Human bodies could survive damage that would destroy any other species. They could heal from injuries that should be permanent. They could keep fighting long after their bodies should have shut down. They could push through pain that would leave other species unconscious. And they never, ever gave up. Scroll to the next section of the file. This was her psychological evaluation, conducted after her recovery was complete. The results were strange. Most survivors of traumatic events showed signs of psychological damage: fear, anxiety, nightmares, flashbacks. These were normal responses to nearly dying. They were expected. They were healthy in their own way. Showed none of these signs. Her fear response was present but suppressed. Her anxiety levels were below average. She reported occasional nightmares but stated that they did not bother her. Her flashbacks were rare and controllable. The psychologist who had evaluated her had written a note at the bottom of the report. Read it 3 times. Subject displays an unusual relationship with trauma. Rather than being damaged by her experiences, she appears to have been forged by them. She does not fear death because she has already died. She does not fear pain because she has already experienced the worst pain imaginable. She does not fear failure because she has already failed in the most complete way possible and still survived. I have never encountered a psychological profile like this. I am not sure whether to be impressed or concerned. Closed the file. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. Now he understood. Central processing had not made an error. The AI systems had looked at survival metrics, her pain tolerance scores, her psychological resilience index, and her combat certifications. They had fed all of this data into their placement algorithms, and the algorithms had made a decision. Park belonged in Predator class. Not because she was big, not because she was strong, not because she had claws or fangs or armor, but because she was something the galaxy had never seen before. A human who had been broken completely and had rebuilt herself into something harder. A human who had stared death in the face and had not blinked. A human who had learned, through the worst possible experience, that she could survive anything. The predators in his class were dangerous because of their bodies, their claws, their scales, their venom, their strength. These were physical advantages, gifts given to them by evolution. Was dangerous because of her mind. She had no natural weapons. She had no natural armor. She had nothing but her human body, small and fragile and easily broken. But she also had something none of the predators had. She had already lost everything. She had already died. She had already experienced the worst that the universe could throw at her. And she was still here. Stood up from his desk. He walked to the window of his office and looked out at the stars. Tomorrow, he would begin training Park alongside the most dangerous species in the galaxy. He did not know if she would survive. He did not know if the predators would accept her or kill her. But he knew one thing for certain. This was going to be the most interesting class he had ever taught. The first combat evaluation came on day 3. Had spent the previous 2 days watching. She sat in the back row during lectures, taking notes on her tablet. She observed the physical training sessions from the sidelines, studying how each species moved. She ate alone in the cafeteria, her small tray of human food looking ridiculous next to the massive portions the predator species required. The other cadets ignored her. They did not speak to her. They did not look at her. To them, she was not worth noticing. She was a mistake, a glitch in the system that would be corrected soon enough. Why waste energy on something so small? Only paid attention to her. The massive watched her constantly. His red eyes followed her as she walked through the corridors. His nostrils flared as he tracked her scent. He was curious about her in the way a hunter is curious about a new type of prey. He had not decided yet whether to eat her or ignore her. On day 3, he made his decision. The combat evaluation was a standard test for Predator class. Cadets would pair off for controlled sparring matches. The AI referee system would monitor the fight and end the match when one combatant was unable to continue or chose to surrender. Medical nanobots floated in the air, ready to heal any injuries that occurred. In theory, the system was safe. In practice, accidents happened. Bones were broken, blood was spilled. Sometimes cadets died. Instructor called out the first pair. 2 stepped onto the mat. They bowed to each other, a gesture of respect borrowed from human martial arts. Then they attacked. The fight lasted 30 seconds. It was brutal and fast. Claws flashed through the air. Bodies slammed against the mat. At the end, one lay on the ground with 4 deep cuts across his chest, and the other stood victorious. The medical nanobots swarmed the wounded cadet. Within minutes, his injuries were healed. More matches followed. Fought. The training hall filled with the sounds of combat, the crack of scales against scales, the hiss of venom, the roar of victory. Through it all, waited. She knew her turn would come. She knew someone would have to fight her. The only question was who. When Instructor called her name, no one stepped forward. The other cadets looked at each other. None of them wanted to fight the human, not because they feared her. They feared what would happen if they accidentally killed her. The academy had strict rules about killing fellow cadets. Tribunals were held, punishments were given, careers were ended. No one wanted to risk their future over a single match against a worthless human. "I will take the human," stepped forward. His massive body cast a shadow over half the training hall. His scales gleamed under the lights like wet blood. His claws extended from his fingers, each one as long as a human hand. "I will be gentle," he said, and his voice was full of amusement. The other cadets laughed. Even Instructor smiled, though he tried to hide it. Everyone knew what was about to happen. The tiny human girl was about to be destroyed. Walked onto the mat. She looked even smaller standing next to. Her head barely reached his chest. Her arms were thinner than his fingers. She was, by every physical measure, completely outmatched. She bowed to him. It was a formal bow, the kind used in human martial arts to show respect to an opponent. Did not bow back. In culture, you did not bow to prey. "Begin," the AI referee announced. Lunged. He was fast for his size, faster than most humans could react. His right arm swept toward in a crushing blow that would have shattered every bone in her body if it connected. It did not connect. Was already moving. Not backward the way most prey would move. She moved forward, toward into the space where his arm would pass over her head. She was too small to block his attacks, too weak to match his strength, so she did not try. Instead, she used her size as an advantage. She became a ghost, slipping through the gaps in his defense like water through rocks. Her palm struck his throat. It was a precise hit, aimed at the soft tissue between his armored scales. The impact was not strong enough to cause serious damage, but it was enough to make him choke. Stumbled back, surprised. He had not expected her to attack. He had not expected her to be fast enough to reach him. Did not give him time to recover. Her knee drove into the nerve cluster behind his leg. This was a spot she had studied carefully over the past 2 days. Anatomy was well documented. Their scales protected most of their body, but there were weak points, places where the armor was thin, places where nerves clustered close to the surface. Knew all of them. His leg buckled. He dropped to one knee, his balance broken. Her elbow cracked against the soft tissue under his jaw. Another weak point. Another precise strike. Hit the mat. The timer showed 4.7 seconds. The training hall went completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Every predator in the room stared at the impossible sight before them. The massive, one of the deadliest warriors in the academy, lay on the ground. The tiny human girl stood over him, her breathing calm, her posture relaxed. She had not taken a single hit. Instructor realized he had stopped breathing. He forced himself to inhale, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. He had seen humans fight before. He had trained many human cadets over his career, but he had never seen a human fight like this. Every movement had been precise. Every strike had been calculated. She had not wasted a single motion. It was like she had known exactly what would do before he did it. Like she had practiced this exact sequence 1,000 times. On the mat stirred. He pushed himself up onto his elbows and looked at. His red eyes were wide with shock. In his entire life, no one had ever put him on the ground that fast. Extended her hand to help him up. "Humans have been prey for most of our history," she said quietly. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "We spent millions of years being hunted by animals much larger and stronger than us. We survived by understanding predators better than they understood themselves." Stared at her hand. In culture, accepting help from an opponent was a sign of weakness. A warrior was supposed to stand on their own. But something had changed in his eyes. The contempt was gone. The amusement was gone. What remained was something new, something that looked almost like respect. He took her hand, helped him to his feet. He towered over her, his massive form blocking the light. But now, for the first time, he did not look down at her like prey. He bowed. It was a shallow bow, barely more than a nod, but it was a bow, from a to a human, from a predator to prey. Except she was not prey anymore. The other cadets watched in stunned silence. They had come to this class expecting to learn how to fight. They had not expected to learn that their understanding of strength was wrong. Size was not strength. Power was not strength. Claws and scales and venom were not strength. Strength was knowing your enemy. Strength was precision. Strength was refusing to be what others expected you to be. Park walked off the mat and returned to her seat in the back row. She picked up her tablet and began taking notes, as if nothing had happened. Around her, 14 predators began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. They had underestimated the human. They would not make that mistake again. 6 weeks passed. In that time, everything changed. Park was no longer ignored. She was no longer treated as a mistake. She was no longer seen as prey waiting to be eaten. Instead, she had become something the predator cadets had never encountered before. She had become a mystery. Every species in the galaxy had a way of giving names to exceptional individuals. These names were earned through great deeds, not given at birth. They described who a person truly was, not just what they were called. By week 6, had earned 4 different names from 4 different species. They called her Ghost Step. This name came from the hunting drills. Every week, Instructor would send cadets into a maze of corridors and obstacles. One cadet would be the prey, the others would be the hunters. The goal was simple: find the prey and catch them. When was the prey? No one could find her. Had incredible hearing. They could hear a heartbeat from 50 meters away. They could track the sound of footsteps through solid walls. Their ears were so sensitive that most prey species never heard them coming. But they could not hear. She moved through the maze like a shadow. Her footsteps made no sound. Her breathing was so quiet it disappeared into the background noise. Even her heartbeat seemed to slow down, becoming barely detectable. The hunters would search for hours and find nothing. Then, just when they were ready to give up, would appear behind them. She would tap them on the shoulder and disappear again before they could turn around. Ghost Step, they said, and there was fear in their voices. They were not used to being the ones who could not hear. They called her Bone Reader. This name came from the sparring matches. Over 6 weeks had fought every cadet in the class at least twice. She had lost some of those matches. She was still small and weak compared to the predators. When they managed to hit her, she went down hard. But she won more than she lost. They could not understand how. She was not stronger than them. She was not faster than them. Her strikes did not have the power to break through their armor. But somehow, she always found the right spot to hit. They had 4 arms and hundreds of joints. Their skeletal structure was complex, with pressure points and nerve clusters hidden in places that should have been impossible to find. Even doctors needed years of study to understand their own anatomy. Found these spots in seconds. She would look at an opponent and see exactly where to strike. The junction between the second and third arm, the nerve bundle behind the knee plate, the soft tissue where the skull connected to the spine. She hit these spots with surgical precision, and they fell. She reads our bones, one said after a match. She looks at us and sees everything. Bone Reader, the others agreed. They called her Stillheart. This name came from their unique biology. With chemical sensors instead of eyes. They could detect fear through pheromones. They could smell adrenaline. They could taste the panic in the air when prey realized they were about to die. These senses made them perfect hunters. Prey could hide, but they could not hide their fear. that would follow the scent of terror to its source. When they fought, they smelled nothing. Her pulse did not elevate during combat. Her body did not release stress hormones. Her blood chemistry stayed perfectly stable, even when she was taking hits that would have panicked any other human. They had never encountered anything like it. Their chemical sensors told them that was not afraid. Their eyes told them that she was fighting for her life. These two facts could not both be true. Still heart, they whispered. They did not understand how a creature could fight without fear. It went against everything they knew about prey. But it was Instructor who gave her the name that stuck. Week 6 was Tactical Simulation Week. The class was divided into 2 squads. Each squad had to complete objectives while trying to stop the other squad from doing the same. It was a test of leadership, strategy, and teamwork. Was placed in Squad 2. She was not the leader. A name had been given command. Was just a regular squad member expected to follow orders and stay alive. The simulation did not go according to plan. Squad 2 walked into an ambush. The enemy had set a trap in a narrow corridor. There was no cover, no escape. Standard protocol said to retreat and regroup, find a defensive position, call for support. Gave the order to fall back. Did not follow the order. Hold position, she said. Her voice was calm, almost quiet, but somehow everyone heard it. What are you doing? Demanded. We need to retreat. We are outnumbered. Hold position, repeated. I will fix this. Before anyone could stop her, she walked forward, alone, into the ambush. The enemy squad was hidden in the shadows ahead. There were 12 of them, all predators, all armed with training weapons that simulated real injuries. If they hit, the simulation would register her as wounded or killed. She walked toward them like she was taking a stroll through a garden. What happened next was recorded by the simulation's cameras. Later, Instructor would watch the footage 17 times, trying to understand what he was seeing. Did not fight like a human. She did not fight like a predator. She fought like something else entirely. She used the environment. She kicked a panel off the wall and the shower of sparks blinded 2 enemies. She shot out a light fixture and the corridor went dark. She made noise in one location and attacked from another. She used psychology. She knew that we're sensitive to heat. She led one into a steam vent and watched him retreat, his scales overheating. She knew that we're claustrophobic. She collapsed a section of ceiling, trapping one in a narrow space. One by one, the enemy squad fell. Not from direct attacks, but from tricks, traps, and misdirection. They never saw her coming. They never knew where she would strike next. In 8 minutes and 43 seconds, all 12 enemies were eliminated. Stood in the center of the corridor, surrounded by fallen opponents. Her training uniform was torn. She had taken 2 hits during the fight, minor injuries that the medical nanobots were already healing. But she was standing. She had won. When Squad 2 reached her position, they found her waiting calmly. She nodded to who was staring at her with his mouth hanging open. The path is clear, she said. We can continue the mission now. That evening, Instructor called to his office. He had watched the footage. He had read the reports. He needed to understand what he had witnessed. That was not a standard tactical approach, he said. No, sir. What would you call it? Thought about the question for a moment. When she answered, her voice was thoughtful. Persistence hunting, sir. My ancestors used it to hunt animals 10 times their size. Humans are not fast enough to catch prey in a sprint. We are not strong enough to overpower them, so we followed them for hours, for days. We tracked them until they were exhausted, until they could not run anymore, until they realized they could not escape. She looked at with those calm, dark eyes. You do not need to be stronger than your enemy. You just need to keep coming. Eventually, the predator realizes it has become the prey. Nodded slowly. He understood now. Did not fight like a predator because she was not a predator. She was something more dangerous. She was an endurance hunter, a species of creature that the galaxy had almost forgotten existed. "From today," he said, his voice carrying across his office, "your tactical designation is Endurance." Accepted the name with a small bow. "Thank you, sir." "Do not thank me, you earned it." Outside the office, 14 predators were waiting. They had heard the conversation. They had seen the simulation footage. They knew what had happened in that corridor. When walked out, they stepped aside to let her pass. And for the first time since she arrived at the academy, they looked at her not as prey, not as a mistake, not as a snack. They looked at her as an equal. 6 months later, Park stood in a line with 14 predators and waited to graduate. The Galactic Military Academy graduation ceremony was the most important event in military education. Admirals came from every sector of the galaxy. Diplomats from over 200 species filled the observation decks. Politicians, journalists, and military leaders all gathered to watch the next generation of warriors receive their commissions. This year, they had come to see something else. Word had spread about Predator Class 7 Delta. Stories had traveled from the Academy to the fleet to the civilian news networks. They were stories about a human woman who had fought alongside the deadliest species in the galaxy, a human woman who had earned their respect, a human woman they called Endurance. Most people did not believe the stories. Humans were average. Humans were weak. Humans belonged in support roles, not in predator class. The stories had to be exaggerated. Then they saw her walk into the ceremony hall. Predator Class 7 Delta entered in perfect formation. 14 massive aliens marched in 2 columns, their movements synchronized, their posture perfect. Their scales gleamed. Their claws were polished. Their armor shone under the ceremony lights. And at the center of the formation, keeping perfect pace despite her smaller stride, walked Park. She was still small. She was still fragile-looking. She was still, by every physical measure, the weakest member of her class. But she walked with them as an equal. The audience fell silent. Cameras focused on the tiny human surrounded by giants. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the impossible sight unfold. The class reached the ceremony stage. They turned to face the audience and stood at attention. Admiral Myra, the highest-ranking human in the galactic fleet, stepped forward to address them. She was an old woman now, with gray hair and a face marked by decades of service. She had fought in 3 major wars. She had commanded fleets of thousands of ships. She had earned the respect of predator species through 30 years of blood and sacrifice. Now she looked at Park, and she felt tears building in her eyes. "Predator Class 7 Delta," she said, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "You have completed the most difficult training program in the galaxy. You have proven yourselves worthy of the title of warrior. You will now receive your commissions and begin your service to the galactic fleet." She paused. "However, before we proceed, your class leader has requested permission to perform a traditional ceremony." The audience murmured in confusion. Traditional ceremony? What did that mean? Stepped forward. He was the class leader now, chosen by his fellow cadets 3 months ago. He had changed since that first day when he had called a snack. He was still massive. He was still dangerous. But there was something different in his eyes, something that had not been there before. He turned to face. And then he raised his clawed fist in the salute of highest honor. This was a salute normally reserved for legendary warriors, for heroes who had saved entire planets, for champions who had defeated impossible enemies. In the entire history of the species, fewer than 100 individuals had received this salute. None of them had been human. One by one, every member of Predator Class 7 Delta did the same. They raised their 4 arms in salute. They crossed their claws over their chests. The other joined, their fists held high. They were saluting. The audience gasped. Admiral Myra felt the tears spill down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. She was too proud to be embarrassed. "Cadet Park," the Admiral said, her voice slightly unsteady. "Your class has recommended you for a special commendation. This is an honor that has never before been given to a human in Predator class. Do you have anything to say?" Looked at her classmates. These were the aliens who had called her prey, the giants who had expected her to break, the predators who had learned over 6 months that humans were not what the galaxy believed them to be. "Only this, Admiral." Her voice was soft, but it carried across the silent hall. Every camera focused on her. Every being in the galaxy leaned forward to hear her words. "Humans are often underestimated. We are small compared to many species. We are fragile compared to others. We do not have natural weapons or armor. When the galaxy looks at us, they see weakness." She paused. "But they are wrong." Her voice grew stronger. "Humans did not become a spacefaring species by being weak. We became one by refusing to stop. When our planet tried to kill us with ice ages and volcanic eruptions and diseases, we survived. When predators hunted us across the plains of we survived. When we ventured into space and found a galaxy full of species stronger and faster and deadlier than us, we survived." She looked out at the audience. She saw humans and aliens alike, all watching her with wide eyes. "We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the fastest. We are not the most venomous or the most armored or the most deadly, but we have something that no other species has." She raised her chin. "We do not give up, ever. No matter how bad things get, no matter how much we lose, no matter how many times we are knocked down, we get back up, we keep fighting, we keep surviving." Her voice rang through the hall. "That is what it means to be human. We are the species that endures. We are the species that refuses to die. And we will still be here, still fighting, still surviving, long after the stars themselves have burned out." She looked at her classmates one final time. "This is not my victory. This is humanity's victory. Every human who ever refused to give up, who ever fought against impossible odds, who ever stood back up after being knocked down. I am just the one who got to show the galaxy what we are." The hall erupted. Applause thundered from every direction. Cheers rose from the human sections. Even the predator species joined in, their roars and howls mixing with the human voices. Admiral Myra stepped forward and pinned the commendation medal on his uniform. Her hands were shaking. "I have served for 30 years, the Admiral said quietly, so only could hear. "I have fought to earn the respect of predator species my entire career. You did it in 6 months." "You showed them what to look for," replied. "I just reminded them what they were seeing." The ceremony ended an hour later. The class was officially graduated. Commissions were given. Assignments were made. The next generation of warriors was ready to serve. That evening, Instructor found alone on an observation deck. She was standing by the window, watching the stars. "The paperwork error," he said. "I looked into it. Did not turn around, and..." There was no error. Central Processing made a deliberate placement. They wanted to see what would happen if a human was put into Predator class. He paused. "You were an experiment." Smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible. "I know." Stared at her. "You knew the whole time." "I knew from the moment I saw my assignment. The Academy never makes mistakes. If I was assigned to Predator class, it was because someone wanted me there." She finally turned to face him. "But I also knew something the algorithm did not predict." "What?" "That I would pass. That I would earn their respect. That when the galaxy sees what one human can do among predators, they will finally understand what humanity truly is." Her smile widened. "We are not prey. We never were. We are the species that hunted mammoths with wooden spears. We are the species that crossed oceans in boats made of wood. We are the species that walked on the moon with technology less powerful than a child's toy." She looked back at the stars. "We are the species that survives, always, no matter what." Stood beside her in silence. He did not know what to say. He had taught hundreds of cadets over his career. He had seen warriors of every species, but he had never met anyone like Park. "Endurance," he said finally. "You earned that name." Nodded. "We all did, sir. Every human who ever refused to give up. Every human who ever stood back up after falling down. Every human who ever looked at impossible odds and said, 'Not today.'" She placed her hand against the window. Beyond the glass, a billion stars burned in the darkness. "I am just the one who got to remind the galaxy." Laughed. It was a sound of pure admiration. "The galaxy will not forget." "No," agreed, "they will not." She turned away from the window and walked toward the door. Tomorrow she would report to her first assignment. Tomorrow she would begin her service to the Galactic Fleet. Tomorrow a new chapter of her life would start. But tonight she allowed herself a moment of peace. She had proven what humanity could be. She had shown the galaxy that small did not mean weak. She had earned the respect of predators. And somewhere, in the vast darkness between the stars, the universe had taken notice. Humanity was here, humanity was staying, and humanity would endure. No matter what.